go through a little bit of some myths, some information about surrogacy, and just talk to Jeanette and Laura about their experiences. So without further ado, I just want to introduce you. So we are joined today by Laura Davis, and Jeanette Passwaters, both of whom are senior case managers at Donor Concierge. Laura's been working in third-party fertility since 2008, and she's a married mother of two and has not only been an egg donor, but she was also a gestational carrier. She worked within an agency before joining Donor Concierge as a senior case manager. And we have Jeanette Passwaters. And Jeanette actually has 18 years experience in the surrogacy industry. Not only did she found her own boutique agency, Jeanette has served as a gestational surrogate for 3 couples, and she remains connected with them today. Jeanette is also a licensed practical nurse and brings extensive knowledge to our team. So we're really grateful to you both for coming on and talking about your experiences as being gestational surrogates, because it's an amazing thing you did. So I wanted to ask you both, so Laura, you've been a gestational carrier twice?
5 times.
5 times? Okay, I got that one wrong. Okay, so 5 times for how many different families?
4 different families.
That is unbelievable. And Jeanette, 3 times? For how many
times, so 3 families, yes.
That is amazing. Let's get this out there. Why did you both become a gestational surrogate? And we could say gestational carrier. And actually what I wanted to do too is go back and the myth of surrogacy is that you did not use your own eggs. You used embryos created from either the eggs of the intended parents or a donor, correct?
Yes.
Correct for me as well.
So why did you become a gestational carrier? Let's ask Laura.
Okay, say who's going first? I loved being pregnant. Absolutely loved being pregnant. I felt so, happy. I know that's not maybe the norm for a lot of pregnant women, but I really felt my healthiest, my most balanced and even. I was just really happy. So all those hormones that were going through my body when I was pregnant that were, I guess, flattering to my personality. So I really enjoyed it. My family enjoyed it. And so we had a boy and a girl, and my son was first, daughter was second, and we were like, okay, we're done. And my husband didn't want any more children, and I really wanted to be pregnant again. So obviously already being in the field of fertility at that time, I was able to research a bit about being a surrogate and bring it up to my husband, and he was on board with it. I got to be pregnant, and he didn't have any more children to take care of.
He had no responsibility for it.
Yeah.
How about you, Jeanette? How did you become a surrogate?
Great question. So I'd have to say that not as quite as lucky enough as Laura, and I loved pregnancy per se, but I definitely loved the outcome and just the joy that it brings to intended families. So I think going way back to when I did my first journey, which was 19 years ago, for me, I think at that time I had seen a TV show because it was relatively unheard about, particularly on the East Coast where I'm originally from. And so I just kind of planted a seed. And so I saw a TV program about it, and it planted a seed. And so I started doing lots of research and did, in fact, an independent journey, which most surrogates don't do on their first journeys. So I kind of did things backwards and did an independent journey for my first journey. And it was a way for me as a single mom at the time, kind of struggling to get through nursing school. It was a way for me to be able to give back. So to be able to give back, but then also to be able to help my family, my little family, myself and my 2 kids at that time of while I was getting through nursing school. So that was the first time. And then for the last 2 times, it was a bit different for me in that I was on the West Coast living in California. And just that feeling that you get, you know, when that baby's born and the intended parents get to hold that baby for the first time, that feeling kind of euphoric feeling is a bit addicting. I like to say, describe it as kind of addicting in that it's just the second best from having your own children and just being able to share that, just be able to share that overwhelming feeling again. So
amazing. So there's a lot of myths about surrogacy, and one of them is that surrogates only do it for the money. Clearly you didn't do it just for the money, although you did say, you know, you felt like you were a single mom. How do you, when people say that to you, like, oh, surrogates only do it for the money, what do you say to them?
that's absolutely not true. Now, I can't speak for each and every single surrogate that there is out there. So some may have different reasons, intentions for doing surrogacy. But I'd have to say, for the most part, from my experience, almost 20 years now of working with other surrogates and getting to know other surrogates, is that no, it's a way, it's a win-win. It's kind of a win-win for everyone. It's a win-win for the family that you're helping create and grow. And it's also a win-win for your own family, for whatever reason that may be. Some surrogates, they may use their compensation to pay off student loans that have kind of been lingering for years and years, or they may want to take a nice family vacation, or they have many, many different reasons. But I would have to say that the number one reason, certainly for me, is the joy that it brings into helping create a family. To me, there's no greater gift than the gift of life.
Laura, I mean, you talk with a lot of our clients and you worked with an agency, compensation is substantial if you look at it. I think in California, or how much would you say surrogates are compensated, not just in California, but generally in the US?
I would say anywhere from $25,000 to $60,000, depending on their experience and location.
Right, and we call it compensation because it's not payment. If you're pregnant for 9.5 months and you work out the cost of what that compensation covers, it's suffering and it's time, right?
Right.
I think there's a huge myth, and that's probably in the press all the time, about that you're going to get so attached to that baby that you don't want to give it up. And a common myth. Laura, what do you say about that?
Well, for one thing, from the beginning, you're introduced to a family. It's a mutual match. And from the beginning, the goal is for them to have a baby. So the entire pregnancy, from even before you're pregnant, is completely a different goal from when you're having your own child. So in the end, when you actually give birth to their baby, you finally have met that goal, and the joy and that what you set out to do with them was to create life and for them to have a baby. You finally have accomplished that, and to see them hold their baby for the first time, to have that joy, and that's completely different from when you're having your own child. So that, for me, there was definitely none of that, because in the end we were accomplishing what we set out to do.
After you've given birth, you have all those hormones and your body's recovering. Isn't there must be some feelings of, I don't know if it's loss or...
Yes, there actually is, but there's, you went through all this and you had this, for me, an incredible relationship with the families that I helped. And so my sense of loss was more about that constant communication. It was more about the loss of the relationship. Not that it's gone, but it's definitely changed. And so the relationship more with the parents was what I kind of longed for a little bit more, that communication we would have all the time.
Did you have the same experience, Jeanette?
Absolutely. Laura she hit the nail on the head with that one. Like, it's, you do feel a sense of loss, but it isn't the same sense of loss. It isn't the sense of loss for the baby. I think it's a sense of loss for the family as a unit, because you've developed such a close relationship with them over time. So kind of, for me, for my last two journeys, they were both international. So when my family departed to go back to Europe, that was when I felt sad, because they were leaving as a family. And even though I still have very regular communication with both of them to this day, and have even visited one of my families in Europe, in London. So yes, it's that sense of loss. And going into it, it's very different for surrogates going into a surrogacy, in that we know from the beginning that these babies are not ours. And we prepare ourselves for that, because a lot of women will ask me, well, how could you do that? Like, how could you give that baby away? It's a very different love than what you have for your own children. You have 9 months when it's your own children to think about how your life is going to change and how are you going to afford formula and diapers and all of those things. Whereas with surrogacy, you don't have those components that you also have to think about. But you go into it knowing that you're going to love that baby, but in a very different way, almost as if you were an aunt. So, so yeah.
How did you choose the families? You know, we know that there's a lot of agencies out there, but there are fewer surrogates than intended parents looking. Did you get a choice in the family that you both worked with? Did you was there something you were looking for in a family? How did you decide on which families to help? To Jeanette or Laura, whichever one.
Go ahead, Laura. You go first.
It was definitely a mutual match. I believe the agency I worked with would show intended parents the surrogate's profile first, and then if they liked the surrogate, then it would be shared with the surrogate. And I do have to say that I did see profiles that I didn't feel connected to, and others, you know, that I read right away and felt, oh yes, I want to help this couple. Maybe it was their letter or their story about why they needed a surrogate. So there's definitely a mutual match. They had to want to match with me, and I had to want to match with them as well.
With 3 different families, how did you decide which? And you said you did an independent journey, so without an agency the first time, correct?
Correct, yes. So for the first time around, I went to a website, and again, I was in the process of just kind of learning all about surrogacy and the ins and outs and all the details, and just collecting all the information that I could about it before I endeavored on my journey. But had found a couple. I was living in Delaware at the time. It's where I was born and raised. And there was a Pennsylvania couple that I connected with independently. So I had posted an ad presenting myself and a little bit about my story and why I wanted to help a family. And vice versa, I read their ad, they reached out to me, and we became very connected and had a wonderful journey together. For my last 2, I was with an agency, so it was with the help of the agency by just reviewing letters. I think both letters that I got from the agencies, I fell in love with the intended parents immediately, so there was not very much back and forth. So I think the agency had a really good idea of what I was looking for in a match.
Kind of write their we call it a dear surrogate letter. What do you recommend that they put into the letter about their situation?
Yeah, so great question. I mean, I think I think first and foremost, telling a little bit about their background and maybe how, if they're partnered or married, how they met their spouses. I think sharing a little bit of their personal lives, you know, what they like to do for fun, I think are great important things, and really what has brought them to surrogacy. So a little bit about their journey and what has brought them into wanting to and needing to work with a surrogate. I think all of those are definitely factors, and then anything else that they like to put in. We try to encourage not too much identifying information, certainly, but we welcome them to feel free to be open and honest about their journey up to this point.
Laura, and for both of you, you know, we only work with agencies, and we do see a lot of, I do see a lot on the internet, for instance, on Facebook groups of independent matching. As a company, we stay away from that because we believe that agencies are there to really protect everybody and to guide the journey. Tell me about the agency role and why, as a surrogate, you decided to work with an agency. And Laura, can you answer that one?
Oh, definitely. For my first journey, I didn't know what needed to happen or what the steps were. So for me, the agency felt like somebody who was watching and taking care of the things that needed to happen. You know, having a attorneys, trust account, background checks, psychological interviews. All of those things were taken care of by an agency, and I feel that as a first-time surrogate, I wouldn't have known those details needed to take care of, or what in what time frame they needed to happen, you know. So that was very helpful for me, because that was a guide and someone who was looking out for my best interests, as well as the intended parents. But I did also do an independent journey, but that was with friends. After my second surrogacy, I carried for friends. So, but by then I had worked with an agency, and so I knew the steps to follow. Plus I had been a surrogate. So even in our independent journey, we went through all the same steps that an agency would have.
And always have an attorney.
Yes.
I think attorney is probably the word that we say most in our office.
Separate attorneys.
Separate representation is important.
You know, how does surrogacy, you know, you're not just, when we talk about people matching, you know, we talk about mutual matching, the surrogate chooses our intended parent as much as the intended parent chooses the surrogate. But in reality, you're not just choosing a surrogate, one person, you're choosing her and her family, whatever her support system may be, whatever kind of a partner she has, but she also has children. So how did surrogacy and you guys being pregnant with somebody else's baby affect your family life? And that's a big question, but I suppose, you know, how do you, first of all, you have to get, if you're partnered, you need to have your partner's agreement or your children's agreement. How did you approach that with your families?
For me, my husband was obviously my hugest support, and I would never have been able to do it without his support. With my family, there was a little bit of pushback to begin with, because they weren't familiar with it. They were scared for my well-being and health. But after we went through the journey, they obviously saw that how beneficial it was. I mean, even they were able to meet the parents I had cared for, and, you know, just became a kind of a big extended family. So initially the support of my husband was a big factor in me even becoming a surrogate. If I didn't have his support, I wouldn't have done it. And our children were so young at the age that I did my first journey, that to them it was just normal. Mommy was carrying a baby for, you know, this family who couldn't do it on their own, and they didn't think anything of it.
How about you, Jeanette?
Yeah, so I very much have to agree with Laura in that for my last two journeys, you know, I was married, so it looked very different than it did with my first one. So my husband was definitely a huge support person for me for my last two journeys. And admittedly, I have to say that even as a nurse, I couldn't give myself any of my intramuscular injections. So he did every single one of them. He's such a trooper and got me through that process. And definitely, I think the first journey, I did feel some pushback, I have to say. And it was actually from my mom, which is very different than what it looks like now. I think it was a very foreign concept to her at that time. And probably to a lot of people that just aren't familiar with surrogacy in the process. And my last two journeys, she's even friends with those intended parents. So she's very much come around over the last few years. So I think just understanding it for a lot of people is just understanding what the process entails, and that I can do this. Yeah, I'm going to be okay. Like I'm going to get through this, and it's going to be a successful journey. And so I think her seeing that to full fruition the first time, I think really allowed herself to open up for my last two journeys.
And your children, did you have any special things to explain it to them about what you were doing and why?
Well, so my son at the time, the first time that I did it was very young. He was only about 4. And so he still vaguely kind of remembers the family. And I more or less communicate with them through social media. And my daughter was older. And so I had to, you know, really just kind of sit down and explain to her, I think, in terms that were appropriate for her age at the time. Certainly they were much older than I did the last two journeys. And we just kind of sat down once, you know, my husband and I had decided that we were going to do it. just sit down and talk to them just as a whole family and just get their input and just really make sure that everybody was on board. Because if I felt like one person felt indifferent about it, I wouldn't have done it, because I feel like it really would have affected everyone in the family. So it was important that everybody was on board and okay with it.
What advice would you give to intended parents about matching with a surrogate and her family in terms of, like, you know, I talked to a surrogate once, and her little boy, who was very young, hadn't had any contact with the baby afterwards, or didn't know what happened to the baby, and they wanted to maybe say hello to the intended parents afterwards. How do you manage the relationship after the baby's born, and kind of as a not just as a surrogate but as a family, and explaining that to young kids, for instance?
For us, and this was in even my profile as a surrogate, that my children needed to be able to say goodbye to the baby, because that baby, even though I was pregnant, was part of our family for 9 months, and so I wanted to make sure that they had that closure of saying goodbye. So with the first two families I cared for, we had that was arranged. It wasn't goodbye at the hospital. It was later, a few weeks later, we had a visit and a goodbye. And I'm still in touch with those parents through social media, but we haven't still had contact as far as in-person contact. And that's always been okay with me. I just wanted to make sure during my journeys that there was a lot of communication and contact, but I definitely am open to whatever is comfortable to the parents after the birth, as long as we had our goodbyes. My last 3 journeys were much different. We're in contact, we see each other, we have holidays together, so that's a lot different. So those children are a part of our lives that I carry still. So that's pretty amazing.
And Jeanette, you carried for international parents, so naturally that relationship probably won't continue in terms of like being there, going on holidays, or seeing each other face to face. So how do you manage that? Do you still chat to each other? Are you still involved with them, or is it just
No, very, very, very much involved. Very much involved. My second journey, they are originally from Madrid and they live in London. They're the ones that my daughter and I went to go and visit. We actually we showed up on their doorstep and totally surprised the pants off of the intended mom, of my intended mom. But just had a FaceTime call with them just a couple of days ago. So I still get to see them. I still send packages to the little ones for both of those families. So I still happen, and I certainly understand that not every relationship will look the same as mine. I just developed over time just a very deep, heartfelt relationship with them, and we'll feel connected to them for eternity.
How old's the oldest child that was born out of your surrogacies for both?
7. She just turned 7. Wow. And the other is 5.
Wow. And Laura?
The first surrogacy, they're twins. They're 11, just turned 11. And then the youngest now is 2.
So how are you referred to? Like, tummy mummy or
tummy mummy? Tummy mummy, yes. Especially for my friends, because one of the intended fathers is Australian, so mummy is kind of a usual term to use. So tummy mummy, yes. And then actually my last couple, they refer to me as Auntie Laura.
Oh. Do you think that intended parents, when they're nervous about choosing a surrogate and they have that first match call, what's some advice you can give them about talking to their potential surrogate and kind of really breaking that ice and figuring out if it's the right fit? Jeanette?
Well, sure, I'll answer that. So I think one of the first things is I can tell them not to be nervous. They're just going to be nervous, just kind of like meeting each other on a first date. But just to try to keep it casual and just be honest and just transparent, and really and truly just be yourselves. It's even a match meeting, there's no pressure, to match with a surrogate. It's a way to really find out more about her and to really feel feel if it's a good fit and if you feel that you have a good vibe with her. I mean, I think that that really tells a lot when you're able to virtually meet someone, even though we're not meeting them per se, but we are meeting them virtually, and that really speaks volumes, I think, to the comfort level that you will have with your surrogate during those calls.
Did either of you work with a mental health therapist throughout this? Did you have mental health therapy support throughout your journeys?
That was part of being with an agency. It was one of our supports that we have for our surrogates, and so it was a monthly support session, and sometimes that was with one-on-one, and then other times that was with other surrogates from the agency. We would get together and meet with the mental health professional and talk as a group. So it was really, really nice to have that.
Jeanette, when you talk with intended parents about what they see the journey, what it's going to be like, we sometimes people, they can't be the one looking after themselves as they're pregnant. They're trusting somebody else to carry this baby and be healthy. And what advice do you give intended parents? For instance, we know sometimes people want the surrogate to eat organic food and not eat fast food and all these things that can start to feel a little controlling. So how do you calm people's nerves and say, how do you negotiate and explain how that all works?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things to remember in surrogacy is that a lot of these journeys are built on trust. And so it's a bit precarious in that you're kind of meeting a perfect stranger essentially and saying, okay, like, you're going to carry my baby, you agree to carry my baby for me. So that's a bit of a precarious, scenario to be in. But I think having trust, developing that sense of trust and knowing that these surrogates have been thoroughly vetted and trusting that your surrogate, if they have agreed to organic food and if that's written into the contract, that will adhere to those requirements and those requests. And quite honestly, if hopefully, surrogates would be honest if they felt like that wouldn't be something that would fit their lifestyle, that they could share that information and be honest with their intended parents if they felt that that wasn't something that they could agree to.
Right, and most surrogates are also raising children, and it's not, I think one of the things we usually say is, these are women who, they know how to be pregnant, they know how to look after themselves, and they have children that they're looking after. So it's not always it's not always easy to be on top of every organic food meal, right? Sometimes you go to McDonald's, sometimes you do eat fast food. We all do.
Yeah. Well, I think we're all entitled to cheat days and and being able to treat ourselves. But yes, and I think too, many intended parents, if that is a wish of theirs, many intended parents are very open to helping supplement, because we all know that, I would love to purchase organic food every week, but I know that can be very expensive. And when you have families and small children who are, raiding everything out of the cabinets, so I think provided that, intended parents are also open to helping to compensate that if that's a special request that they want to ask of their surrogate.
I'd love to add to that too, because I was a surrogate on the receiving end of parents who requested organic, fresh juice every day, juicing at home and things. And something that was so helpful was that they actually would order it and send it to me. So I wasn't even having to, select it while I was, doing my usual grocery shop. I just get what I needed for my family, and then anything that they wanted me to have, they would send. And it was so helpful that I was willing to do it, but I was supported and I didn't have to actually go get it myself. So
that's a great idea. And nowadays, anything can be delivered.
Exactly.
I think too, surrogates also are the ones, you guys, I talked to you about this, you're very aware of the importance that are being placed on these beautiful embryos too. These are people generally who have gone through so much stress, so much heartache to get to this point, who, we don't all, unless you're a male couple, you're not starting off using a surrogate. And I think you guys seem to have this heartfelt understanding that this is precious, and you're, as you said, Jeanette, it's a trust thing, isn't it? It's allowing, feeling comfortable that you can trust that these people are doing this for your benefit, and you're all in this together.
Absolutely.
Would you guys say that surrogacy changed your life?
100%.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I had retired from surrogacy and ended up doing my last journey because we had made a huge move in our family and moved across the sea, and all of my new friends and people that we met there, coworkers, didn't know me as a surrogate because I had done that all year. And so that's honestly was one of the biggest drives in wanting to do it again, was that this new life that we created in a new place, I needed to have that same identity with everybody there. And so my last, I was thinking, oh, I'm getting older. If I want to do this again, this is the perfect time. And then, our new community can still know me as Laura the surrogate. So it was very important to me.
If you could do it again, would you?
Now, no, I'm I'm happily done. I've been pregnant enough.
What about you, Jeanette? How would you do it again?
I think definitely at this stage in my life, that it's going to be a no for me as well. 3 wonderful journeys and cherish them with all my heart. But yeah, my body was also telling me, okay, it's time to quit this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both so much. Did we miss anything? Is there any other advice you'd like to give to either people who want to be surrogates or intended parents who are thinking about, going through the surrogacy journey to have their children? Trust.
I'm going to pick on Jeanette. Trust is
yeah.
Yeah. And it's a step-by-step journey, isn't it? That's one thing that we always impart our knowledge on our clients, is that it doesn't happen overnight, obviously.
Right.
You have to go through the steps. So whether that's finding the right surrogate, having the medical review, having the background checks, mental health support, these are things that are in place to make it a journey that's successful for everybody, right?
Absolutely. And and it's great to be able to celebrate those little milestones along the way. Because there are a lot of steps. It definitely takes a village to see a surrogacy through fruition. So lots of team members that all come together to see it through the end. But certainly, definitely, if there's concerns, questions along the way, reaching out to the agency and maybe those case managers, and yeah. But I think definitely we've covered a lot. I think we covered the majority of it. I'm sure there's a piece that we may have missed, but
definitely. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Michelle.
All right, we'll talk again.
Great, sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.